Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. Uh, it's again Saturday, and with Saturday, আমি জানো যে কি we are back with economics or live class in YouTube. Our today's class is excess demand and deficient demand. Again, very much important topic for class 12 examination, final examination. আৰু I hope তোমালোকে আজিৰ ক্লাছটোৰ পৰা বহুতখিনি উপকৃত হ'বা বিকজ এই মেক্ৰ' ইকনমিক্সৰ যোনখিনি টপিকছ হয় এইখিনি নট অনলি ইজ ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট ফৰ দ্য বৰ্ড এক্সামিনেশ্যন মই ৰিপিটেডলি কওঁ দিজ আৰ অলছ' ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট ফৰ এনি টাইপ অফ এক্সামিনেশ্যন ডেট ইউ উইল বি চিটিং ইন দ্য ফিউচাৰ ইউ জি চি নেট হওক তাৰপিছত যদি আমাৰ চি ইউ ই টি হওক চি ইউ ই টি ইউ জি চি ইউ ই টি পি জি হয়নে for every examination that you need it, these type of questions are very much important. So in today's class, we will be trying to understand excess demand and deficient demand in economics. Okay? So let's start today's class with great zeal and enthusiasm, and let us understand about the concept of excess demand first. Excess demand ki hoy, hekhini ami firstly janibo try koro. What is excess demand? Jetia aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply at full employment level of equilibrium, it is said to be as the situation of excess demand. ঠিক আছে? So excess demand is actually a situation jot aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply at full employment level of equilibrium. What is full employment level of equilibrium? Jot hokolu resource fully employed hoi ase. এনেকুৱা যেতিয়া situation হয় যেতিয়া aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply, it actually gives rise to inflationary gap. যেতিয়া aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply, it gives rise to inflationary gap. Now, what is inflationary gap? Inflationary gap is a gap by which the actual aggregate demand exceeds the aggregate demand required to establish the full employment equilibrium. Yate ki koise what is inflationary gap? Ami diagrammatically bujam, but what is inflationary gap? Inflationary gap is the gap jot actual aggregate demand is more than the required aggregate demand. Actual aggregate demand is more than the required aggregate demand to establish the full employment equilibrium. Tamane amak jodi full employment equilibrium establish koribole karne AD1 lagisil equal to aggregate supply, etu amar full employment equilibrium. Yet aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply. Tamane yat ami ki kobo paru? AD is more than AD1. What is AD1? AD1 is the required aggregate demand. Etu is amar required aggregate demand juntu full employment equilibrium establish korute amak lagibo, but amar aggregate demand kiman khini ase? AD ase. ঠিক আছে? So this actually the is onto inflationary gap hoy, a inflationary gap to give rise to the situation of inflation. Gives rise to the situation of inflation. And what is inflation? Inflation is nothing but it is the rise in general price level of the economy. ঠিক আছে? Inflation is the rise in general price level of the economy. ঠিক আছে? So what we have learned about excess demand, it is excess demand is when aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply at full employment level of equilibrium. Aru this happens, when this happens, it gives rise to the situation of inflationary gap. What is inflationary gap? It is the gap jetia actual aggregate demand is more than required aggregate demand to establish the full employment level equilibrium. And it gives rise to inflationary situation, means rise in general price level in the economy. ঠিক আছে? এইটো যোনটো diagrammatically মই যদি বুজাও, এইটো এই যোনটো 45 ডিগ্ৰী লাইন হয়, এইটো aggregate supply curve হয়, এইটো aggregate supply curve হয়, হ'ব? আৰু তোমাৰ aggregate supply curve ডাল AS হয়, আৰু এই যোনডাল AD curve হয়, এইডাল actually আমাৰ এডাল actually required aggregate demand hoy, required aggregate demand. Tamane full employment equilibrium establish koribo karne full employment equilibrium code establish hoy ase point E. So point E is the full employment equilibrium level. Point E required aggregate demand AD is equal to actual aggregate supply AS. hoine mane required aggregate demand is equal to required aggregate supply hoine, and therefore at point T full employment equilibrium is established. Now let us suppose that ki aggregate demand bari goise due to increase in maybe investment. Suppose due to rise in investment, which is shown by change in I, rise in investment, the aggregate demand curve shifts towards upward. So the new aggregate demand curve is this. AD1. So AD1 dal eta ki hobo? Actual aggregate demand curve hobo. Required aggregate demand curve dal amar kundal asil AD aru actual aggregate demand curve dal kundal AD1. Eta ei juntu situation ot amak required aggregate demand kiman lage AD, kintu actual aggregate demand kiman khini ase AD1. By the amount kiman khini di extra ase ekhini FE. A FE amount or tomar swa actual aggregate demand AD1 is more than the required aggregate demand AD by FE. By FE. Aru e FE to a asolte inflationary gap hoy. Olop agote je moi porhalu the inflationary gap is the gap by which the actual aggregate demand is more than the required aggregate demand. Required aggregate demand E, actual aggregate demand code ase at point F. So FE will be the inflationary gap. I hope you are clear with this. So FE or EF is considered to be as the inflationary gap. I hope you are clear with this. Now let us understand what are the various reasons for excess demand. Kibur karonot aggregate demand, aggregate supply koi besi hobo karone pare. Thik ase. The first is rise in the propensity to consume. What is rise in propensity to consume? Rise in propensity to consume mane jetia manuhor consumption expenditure bahe. Manuhe besike consumption koribo khuje aru manuhe komke save koribo khuje. Jetia manuhe besike consume koribo khuje manuhor aggregate demand bahi jabo. Right? So this is the first reason for rise in excess demand. So excess demand may arise because of increase in consumption expenditure due to rise in propensity to consume or fall in propensity to save. Jetia manuhor consumption kora propensity ba probability barhi goise ba manuhor save kora propensity to komi goise mane manuhe besike consume korise tetia manuhor aggregate demand ki hobo barhi jabo. Thik ase? Next reason to is a reduction in taxes. Jetia tax agote besike dibo laga hoisil manuhor income same asile tetia manuhe komke bostu purchase koribo parisil because a majority portion of it was to be given as tax. Now jetia government is suppose tax reduce kori dise, now more money will be available in the hands of the people for spending on consumption. So when there will be more consumption, again there will be increase in aggregate demand. Thik hai? Next is an increase in government expenditure. What is increase in government expenditure? Suppose government agote tumalake education ot bahut paisa kharos koribo lagisil. Suppose tumalake medical facilities ot bahut besi paisa kharos koribo lagisil. Now government has started increasing the government expenditure. Government expenditure mane ki hoy je ki government e etia paisa kharos korise jot free education provide korise, free healthcare facilities provide korise. Eta jetia free education aru free healthcare facilities government e provide korise tetia tumalukor hatot পইচা যোনখিনি আগতে এডুকেশন আৰু হেলথ কেয়াৰত খৰচ কৰি আছিলা হেখিনি এতিয়া তোমালোকৰ হাততে থাকি যাব নে নাই তোমালোকৰ হাতত যেতিয়া পইচা এক্সট্ৰা থাকি যাব কি কৰিবা তোমালোকে বেছিকে কনজিউম কৰিবা তো বেছিকে কনজিউম কৰিলে কি হ'ব এগেইন এগ্ৰিগেট ডিমান্ড বাঢ়ি যাব বাট যিমান এগ্ৰিগেট ডিমান্ড বাঢ়ি গৈছে এগ্ৰিগেট সাপ্লাইটো বাঢ়িব নোৱাৰে হেতু কাৰণে ইট লিডস টু দা সিচুৱেশন অফ এক্সেস ডিমান্ড আই হোপ ইউ আৰ ক্লিয়াৰ উইথ দিস Because agote tumaleke nijor pocketor pra kharos kori education aru healthcare facilities ot kharos koribo lagisil but now government has government has increased its expenditure on it so that tumaloke komke kharos korile hoy aru tumaloke jehetu hebilakot komke kharos kori asa now you increase your consumption level next to increase in investment of course moi olop agote tumalokok dekhalu jetia investment increase hoi jay hoine aggregate demand tumar automatically बढ़ी जाए. There is increase in investment due to decrease in rate of interest or increase in actually expected returns. तुम्हार investment ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট আৰু ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্টৰ মাজত ইনভাৰ্ছ ৰিলেশ্যনশ্বিপ আছে যেতিয়া ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট কমি যায় ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট বাঢ়ি যায় যেতিয়া ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট বাঢ়ি যায় ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট কমি যায় এইটো কিহৰ কাৰণে ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট মানে কি হয় ছাপ'জ তুমি বেংকত পইচাখিনি থৈ দিয়া হয়নে তাৰে পৰা তুমি বহুত বেছি ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট পাই আছা গতিকে তুমি ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট নকৰিবা কাৰণ তুমি বেংকত পইচা থোৱাৰ পৰাই তুমি বেছিকৈ ৰিটাৰ্ণ পাই আছা কিন্তু বেংকত পইচাখিনি থৈ পেলাই তুমি কমকৈ ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট পাই আছা হয়নে নাই গতিকে তুমি সেইখিনি পইচা বেংকত থোৱাতকৈ ওলাই আনি তুমি ইনভেষ্ট কৰিবা চ' দিছ একচুৱেলি এই কথাখিনিৰ পৰাই আমি এই ইনভাৰ্ছ ৰিলেশ্যনশ্বিপটো পাওঁ যে ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট বাঢ়িলে মানুহে ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট কমাই দিয়ে মানুহে পইচাখিনি বেংকতে থৈ দিয়ে কিন্তু ৰেট অফ ইণ্টাৰেষ্ট যেতিয়া কমি যায় ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট বঢ়াই দিয়ে বিকজ বেংকত থৈ দিলে সিমানখিনি লাভ নহ'ব তাতকৈ ওলাই আনি ইনভেষ্টমেণ্ট কৰিলে বেছিকৈ লাভ হ'ব বুলি মানুহে বাঢ়ে গতিকে when there is increase in investment due to decrease in rate of interest or investment কিহৰ কাৰণে বাঢ়ে যেতিয়া মানুহৰ expected return from such investment বেছি হয় তেতিয়া মানুহৰ actually investment increase হয় so when there is increase in investment due to decrease in rate of interest or due to increase in expected returns in the future তেতিয়াও তোমাৰ aggregate demand বাঢ়ি যায় so rise in aggregate demand with aggregate supply remaining constant gives rise to the problem of excess demand ঠিক আছে I hope you are clear till this much okay again there is another aspect to why there is problem of excess demand it is fall in import আৰু rise in export যেতিয়া তোমাৰ import fall হয় so decrease in import due to higher international prices in comparison to domestic prices may also lead to excess demand import ketia fall hoy jetia international market price bari jay international market যেতিয়া price বাঢ়ি যায় মানুহে import নকৰে মানুহে ক'ত কিনিব মানুহে যদি import নকৰে মানুহে domestic marketতে কিনিব ন মানুহে domestic marketতে তো কিনিব এটা domestic marketত যেতিয়া আগতে কিছুমান বস্তু import কৰিছিল domestic marketত বেছিকে নিকিনিছিলে but now because of increase in international marketত price মানুহে import কৰা নাই import কমি গৈ আছে so সেইখিনি বস্তু মানুহে ক'ত কিনিব domestic marketত কিনিব যেতিয়া domestic marketত মানুহে বস্তুখিনি কিনিব so all aggregate demand বাঢ়ি যাব already যিমানখিনি aggregate demand আছিলে aggregate demand already যিমান আছিল তাতকে এতিয়া নতুন aggregate demand তো বাঢ়ি যাব because আগতে a part of it came from import now everything is bought from the domestic market বুজি পাইছা so fall in import is again another important reason for increase in aggregate demand next to hoise rise in export মানে কি তুমি যেতিয়া বেছিকে export কৰিবা from your country to rest of the world তেতিয়াও তোমাৰ কি হ'ব তুমি আমাৰ কান্ট্ৰিৰ আগতে যিমানখিনি aggregate demand আছিল এতিয়া বাঢ়ি যাব because a part of it will be also used to হয়নে send goods from our country to a different country হয়নে so whenever there is rise in export হয়নে when there is rise in export যেতিয়া তোমাৰ comparatively আমাৰ domestic goods or price কমি যায় হয়নে domestic currency price কমি যায় there will be rise in export so বাহিৰা কান্ট্ৰিৰ কাৰণে আমাৰ কান্ট্ৰিৰ পৰা বস্তুটো কিনিলে বেছি লাভ হ'ব because the price is cheaper হয়নে so already domestic market যিমানখিনি aggregate demand আছিল তাৰ লগত সেইখিনি extra add হৈ গ'ল তাৰ মানে there is again increase in aggregate demand when there is increase in more aggregate demand aggregate supply cannot be increased at the same time therefore there will be excess demand next is a deficit financing what is deficit financing excess demand may be also due to increase in deficit financing so deficit financing mane increase in money supply jetia tumi currency notunke bonaisa hoine to actually finance the problem of excess demand hetuk deficit financing buli koa hoy so whenever there is deficit financing mane ekhon economic correct koribo karone money supply increase kore money supply keneke increase kore through deficit financing so of course jetia money supply bahi jabo manhor hatot paisa beshi thakibo manhor hatot paisa thakile manhe first kam ki koribo consumption beshi koribo and aggregate demand bahi jabo as a result because of this reason also aggregate demand increases So মানে actual aggregate demand increases beyond the required aggregate demand at full employment level, which leads to excess demand like situation. ঠিক আছে? I hope you are clear with these reasons. Hobo. Now what are the various impact of excess demand? The various impact of excess demand is that effect on output. Output or echo change nahe because already full employment level at ase. Aggregate demand increase hoy joar loge loge aggregate supply increase koribo karone nware hoine loga log nware. Gotike there will be no effect on output. Effect on employment. Employment to echo effect no hoy because it is already on full employment equilibrium hoine. So tatke aru capacity নাই যে কি resource basic employ koribo manu basic employ koribo. So both output and employment there will be no impact. The only impact will be on the price level, that is when there is excess demand, when aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply, it leads to rise in price level, which is also said to be as inflation. ঠিক আছে? This is the only impact of aggregate demand on the economy. ঠিক আছে? Next let us understand about deficient demand. Excess demand or exactly opposite hoise deficient demand. What is deficient demand? Jetia tumar aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, it is said to be as deficient demand in the full employment equilibrium. Corresponding to full employment equilibrium, jetia aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, it is said to be as tumar deficient demand. It a deficient demand give rise to actually deflationary gap. Deficient demand gives rise to deflationary gap. What is deflationary gap? Jetia tumar actual to aggregate demand hoy, it is less than the required aggregate demand to achieve full employment equilibrium, it is said to be as deflationary gap. And because of this deflationary gap, there gives rise to the situation of deflation in the economy. What is deflation? Jetia general price level in the economy falls. Jetia general price level in the economy falls. Junto ami diagrammatically yate explain koribo parim. Yate again AS dal aggregate supply curve hoy. Jundal red color curve dekhisa hedal tumar required aggregate demand hoy. Edal amar ki hoy required aggregate demand curve hoy. Edal amar required aggregate demand curve hoy aru AD1 dal amar actual aggregate demand curve hoy. Actual aggregate demand curve hoy. ঠিক আছে? So required aggregate demand curve dal hoy AD hoine aru aggregate supply curve dal hoy AS aru at point E the full employment equilibrium is achieved. At point E the full employment equilibrium is achieved. Now let us suppose that ki investment komi ahise because rate of interest badhi goise. So due to fall in investment shown by minus change in I, dekhisa no? Due to fall in investment shown by minus change in I, the aggregate demand curve hoine shift towards downwards. And the new aggregate demand curve is AD1. AD1 is what? The actual aggregate demand in the economy. So aggregate supply kiman ase AS আৰু actual aggregate demand code আছে ইয়াতে হয়নে actual aggregate demand তামানে code আছে তোমাৰ হেতু নহয় সৰি ইয়াতে AD1. So the gap by which the actual aggregate demand is less than the required aggregate demand এইখিনিক তোমাৰ deflationary gap বুলি কয়, given by EG in our diagram. Given by EG in our diagram. Fine, given by EG in our diagram. So what is EG? EG is the deflationary gap where juntu require actual juntu aggregate demand kuntu hoy G kintu required aggregate demand kiman hoy E. So EG is the deflationary gap. ঠিক আছে? And this deflationary gap or karne there is actually deflation in the economy which is fall in the general price level. I hope you are clear till this much. Now let us see what are the various reasons for deficient demand. So excess demand are completely opposite hobo. Number 1, decrease in propensity to consume. Manuor consumption kora propensity komi goise, manue save basically korise. So aggregate demand komi jabo. Number 2, increase in taxes. Government tax increase kori dise. Now a majority portion of your earning goes to tax. Lesser amount available for you for consumption. Therefore aggregate demand komi ahise. Decrease in government expenditure. Agote government expenditure increase korisil in providing facilities like health and education free of cost. Now because government expenditure কমাই দিছে, now you will have to pay for this. Medical facilities or কাৰণে বেছিকে pay কৰিব লাগিব, schooling or কাৰণে বেছিকে pay কৰিব লাগিব. As a result, তোমাৰ হাতত কম পইচা আছে for consumption. Aggregate demand তোমাৰ কি হ'ব? কমি আহিব। ঠিক আছে? Next reason to কি হয়? Next reason to তোমাৰ কি হ'ব? Rise in import. What is rise in import? Rise in import মানে কি হয়? এতিয়া তোমাৰ domestic market ত price to বাঢ়ি গৈছে। কেতিয়া import rise হয়? Import is shown by M. কেতিয়া import rise হয়? যেতিয়া domestic market ত price to বাঢ়ি গৈছে। So domestic market ত যেতিয়া price to বাঢ়ি গৈছে, it is more cheaper for the people to import. So মানুহে international market ৰ পৰা বেছিকে consume কৰিছে। মানুহে ইন্টাৰনেশ্যনেল মাৰ্কেটৰ পৰা বেছিকে কনজিউম কৰিছে। সো আধাতকে বেছি বস্তু যদি ইম্পৰ্টৰ পৰা আহি আছে, ডমেষ্টিক মাৰ্কেটৰ পৰা মানুহে কমকে কনজিউম কৰিছে, গতিকে ডমেষ্টিক মাৰ্কেটত কি হৈছে? এগ্ৰিগেট ডিমাণ্ড তোমাৰ কমি গৈছে। ঠিক আছে? নেক্সটটো হৈছে ফল ইন এক্সপোৰ্ট। অফক'ৰ্ছ ডমেষ্টিক মাৰ্কেটত যদি প্ৰাইচ বাঢ়ি গৈছে, এক্সপোৰ্ট ফল হ'ব ন? Domestic market যদি price বাঢ়ি গৈছে, why will international residents buy from our country? It will be more expensive for them to buy from India. So in this case, export তোমাৰ কি হ'ব? Fall হ'ব। Export fall হ'ব মানে কি? A part of goods that was going out of our country to some other country will remain with our country itself. So aggregate demand in our country with what? Fall. মানুহৰটো সেইখিনি aggregate demand কমি গ'ল নে নাই? বাহিৰৰ মানুহখিনিৰ যোনখিনি aggregate demand কমি গ'ল, গতিকে ultimately aggregate demand in our country will fall. ঠিক আছে? Next is a fall in investment expenditure. Fall in investment expenditure. When will investment fall? যেতিয়া rate of interest বাঢ়ি গৈছে। Rate of interest বাঢ়ি গৈছে, so মানুহে বেছিকে বেংকৰ লগত পইচা থলে বেছিকে লাভ হ'ব বুলি ভাবে। বা expected return in future যদি কমি গৈছে, তেতিয়াও মানুহে তোমাৰ কি হ'ব? Investment fall হ'ব। So when there is fall in investment, again aggregate demand তোমাৰ fall হ'ব। So these are the various reasons why aggregate demand falls beyond aggregate supply at full employment level and there is deficient demand in the economy. Now what are the various effects of deficient demand? What are the various effects of deficient demand? যেতিয়া deficient demand হৈছে মানে কি? Aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. তাৰ মানে already তোমাৰ economy inventory আছে, already economy তোমাৰ inventory আছে, যিমানখিনি মানে over goods produce কৰি থোৱা হৈছে। ইয়াতে আকৌ নতুন goods produce কৰিব লগা কাৰণে একো নাই, because aggregate demand বহুত কম। Sorry, এইটো situation নহয়। Aggregate demand বহুত কম, aggregate supply বহুত বাঢ়ি আছে। হয় না? ইয়াত aggregate demand কম, ইয়াতে aggregate supply বাঢ়ি আছে। So aggregate supply বাঢ়ি আছে মানে কি? There is already many মানে large volume of inventory with the producers. গতিকে আৰু produce কৰিব লাগিব নেকি? আৰু যদি produce কৰে, aggregate supply বাঢ়িহে গৈ থাকিব, deficient demandৰ problemটো আৰুহে বাঢ়ি গৈ থাকিব। গতিকে ইয়াতে কি হ'ব? Effect on output কি হ'ব? It will lead to fall in output because the producers will no more produce output. Because already there is sufficient output already being produced as inventory আছে। Next to হৈছে যে যিমান মানুহ আগতে output যদি বেছিকে produce নকৰে, মানুহক employ কৰি ৰাখিব কিয়? So employment will also reduce, so few people will also become unemployed in the economy. কাৰণ বস্তু কমকে produce হৈ আছে, বস্তু যদি কমকে produce হৈ আছে, বেছিকে মানুহ কিহৰ কাৰণে employed হিচাপে ৰাখিব? So unemployment বাঢ়িব, employment কমিব, হয় নে নাই? Next is the effect on general price level. Of course, যেতিয়া aggregate supply is more than aggregate demand. Supply বেছিকে হৈ আছে, demand কম. So price will fall. So it will lead to overall deflationary situation in the economy. I hope you are clear with this. Due to deficient demand, output will be reduced because already there is more than enough aggregate supply. Next to, since output reduce hobo, the people who are already employed will be removed. Karan output jodi produce nokore he manu belakok employed kori rakhi ki labh hobo, right? So effect on employment, unemployment badhibo, and effect on general price level is price level will decrease since aggregate supply is more than aggregate demand. I hope you are clear with this concept of excess demand and deficient demand, along with understanding its impact and along with understanding the reasons behind occurrence of excess demand and deficient demand. That's all for today's class. In case of any doubt, please feel free to write to us in the comment box and we will try to solve your doubt as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining with me. We will meet in the next week with another live class. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.